If you had the opportunity to live in a children's wonderland, would you choose anywhere else? We don't just say, we do. It's the Stain City way.
Hello and welcome to Real Talk with myself, Anele on SABC3, where the stage is yours. While slavery was abolished about, 200 years ago, modern-day slavery in South Africa remains a dark reality. Last year alone, the Global Slavery Index estimated that 45.8 million people around the world are trapped today in modern slavery, and there are about 250,000 modern-day slaves in South Africa. Today we're looking at the second biggest criminal industry, the first being narcotics, this one human trafficking, which generates up to 50 billion rand a year. And joining me in studio right now is a woman who was sold into slavery when she was just 18 years old by a woman she thought was a friend. She has now written a book on her life of prostitution and her ultimate escape from it all. Please help me in welcoming Grizelda Grootboom to Real Talk. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. What an honor.
Grizelda.
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 Yeah.
Okay. Do you have a second name?
It's Mariana.
Maria. Look, I'm picking up a lot of colored names, right? But then you are speaking closer to me.
Yeah.
So which one is it?
It is still Grizelda Mariana Grootboom. My mom had to give me that name during her times of giving birth to me in the city of Cape Town in Woodstock, which was back then
a colored area.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So for her to be in the clinic and allowed, it was very Afrikaans located, that Aibo, you need to. So everything had to change there and then.
All right. But then I understand you grew up with your grandparents.
Yes, in the District 6 Woodstock, Roger Street, which is a colored area.
Okay, so when did you and your mom, stop living with each other?
I never lived with my mom. It was my grandparents of my dad. So they met once and had their moments, and then she just gave him, she gave me over to him, and that was it.
Immediately?
That was it.
And then you were raised by your grandparents, who you say were very loving.
Oh yes, they were the best. They were the best with food. They were the best. Oh my goodness, my granny was the best.
And you can see kids that grow up with a grandmother, hey? They like a little spoiled. No, really, like, they're spoiled and they're always wearing a jersey, even if it's hot. She's just like, it's so hot. But grandmothers, when you're walking out, they're like, tatty jersey.
No, that really, my grandmother used to brush my hair better because it had so much African hair. Yeah. And the day, my mom cut it, I knew my life was just over. It was, because I had a very big afro and I'm still trying to grow it back.
Still trying to grow it back.
Yes.
I know the problems.
Yes.
So when did your grandparents pass away? Because by 8 years old, you were saying that you were just like up and down between your dad and orphanages and...
It happened so fast, like in a year where everything just took place of them being removed. But it first happened with my cat, and she was pregnant. And then, my dad's brother took the cat and threw it in the gardens. And that moment became sad. And then a week later, my grandfather was a bus accident and he died. And then 2 months later, it was my granny. And then just after that, then the whole community needed to be moved. And they didn't follow procedures getting their space from government in the flats that they get because new development was taking place. And it just all happened so fast. It was already...
So everything just came crumbling down at the
same time. It was already you getting used to the harbour because that was the closest from Woodstock down to Roger Street all the way to the docks. And that's where everybody just went to sit there and drink because that's where the taverns were. And it's like a 10-minute walk from Woodstock to the parade. So you are in town already. So that year, everything just quickly happened.
So from your grandmother's place, do you go live under the bridge immediately, or do you first try to live with your dad?
My dad, we first tried to live with my dad. Because
when you say we, who's we?
Me and my dad together, because he started getting very frustrated with the fact he cannot provide and using alcohol. So he would just hang out with me at the harbour and try to get a couple of fishes from the boats to sell, but always leave me there. like the whole day. And then in the evening, we'll walk around and go for, family shelters where he needs to pay 25 rand for me. And at some point, it became so irritating to him where he just left me at the shelter for like a week or so. And then, family shelters was like, you guys need to leave the shelter so we can clean so you can come back again. So you need to be taken out of the shelter during the day. So it's not like you have a space to go. And at some point, he just didn't come back. Like 3 days, he wouldn't come back, 2 weeks, and that's how it happened.
So how, in your mind, where are you saying he is? Or do you at that young age understand that this man is troubled, this man does not care about me, and in fact, the 25 rand that he has to pay for me, he could be buying two beers, so really?
I kept on looking for him. I just would go out and look for him because that routine started us looking for a place to stay. So I knew the routes as we were walking. So it just became me and my dad. I just knew it was me and my dad. I didn't know it was me and my mom. And I kept on looking and I kept on looking until, I got to see my dad's brother, which was, he was gay and he was enjoying the nightlife, so you could find him anywhere in town. And then he spotted the fact, hey, your mom, she got out of the harbor, got married, and she's in Khayelitsha, and you can find her there. And that also was just like uncle moment talk at the docks, and that's it, and he disappeared. Like, I got some guys to that.
Yeah.
So listen, take the train, go to Khayelitsha, and then get off in Olungile and walk and look for the house dresses. And that's how it was. It wasn't a family moment where we sit down and try to solve the issue to be all together and work together. No, everybody was just disconnected in their own area.
So you found your mom?
I think I went to Nolungile like at least about 3 times before I got off the train and just go back because I've never met her and I didn't know what to say and I didn't know what to expect. And then eventually when I did knock, I was just carrying a plastic bag with my jersey inside it and T-shirts and there was no communication, just like, oh, okay, again. And then she had to explain herself to her husband of saying...
Which wasn't nice.
Which wasn't like, most of the dogs, the Roger Street, quick, and yeah, she's my brother's daughter. She's not my child.
Okay.
And that's how it went. And from there, it was uncomfortable for the 2 weeks because there was Xhosa and I was Afrikaans.
Yes.
There was a whole culture shift that I need to adapt. There was just sand. There was nothing, and just that got to me. But then I knew staying in my mom's house, I had to cook, I had to yonke lonto, kamanzi. When I had to go and take water, that was like a peer pressure moment for me because I had to go and stand amongst other kids. And then I had to start get familiar with the whole thing. Even though I couldn't speak properly, and then I became social.
So when was the first time you were raped?
It was in Khayelitsha site, so you could say at least about 3 weeks being there, if I can count properly. And it was a normal day where I'm done with my duties in the house. My mom was working back then at the mall that was close by, at a furniture shop. And I was getting friends. I have friends, and I had one particular friend. And that's when the evening came and the boys came and the Folly Boys, 4 of them, and then
the Folly Boys, that what they used to be called?
Yeah, Folly Boys.
Were they known that they were notorious?
Yes,
okay.
Yes. And that's when, we were told, like, move. And it was, going to the evening of a township where everybody is probably mthandazweni or every inside, and the only thing that you see driving around in the sand is abo driver with things and walking. And that's when, they said, like, guys, move. And we were 4, and we were just 2. And as we walked up, going closer to OC, that space now is a clinic, and that's where it ends. It happened such a boyfriend-girlfriend moment to the first girl. And I thought, okay, maybe, like,
she's in on it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because the guy that she's with, like, I heard it sometimes, like, I don't, but she still led, like, no, don't worry. And then they were busy with her. The one guy was already sitting with me, Yalandela, you next. And I'm like, with who? Nobody's my boyfriend, And in saying that, okay, mess, and then all the boys,
Then all the boys, like, had their way with you?
Because she left.
Okay, so did you and her ever speak afterwards?
No. The minute I got to leave the shack and everything, everything in the street was just quiet. Like even there was no that normal day of coming to back. And then she was nowhere to be found. Like ingathi bamkotusile. And with me, the shame that I brought to the family, I got beaten up. I didn't bring the water back, and I'm back for late. And I'm back late in the evening.
Did you say what had just happened to you?
I couldn't because I got a smack at the door.
Okay.
And Sapeti Paley.
Okay.
So it was like, oh, so now you're getting used to the area. Okay, good
now
for you.
Now you're running around with boys.
Nice. You just like, oh, okay, come here. And then a smack. And that was it. And then, you know, my mom has 2 boys, and then they went on with their normal life after my beating, and I had to stay in the kitchen and clean up. I didn't get food. But my head in my plan was like, Ngomso, I'm leaving.
I'm out of here.
I'm leaving when she goes to work.
Listen, what follows is a life of living hand to mouth, from one street corner to another, being pimped, being taught how to strip, acquiring and using a variety of drugs, from buttons, ecstasy, and cannabis to cocaine, to sustain herself. How did she escape all of that? Find out after the break. And you tune into Real Talk. If you just join us, I'm in conversation with Grizelda Grootboom, who was human trafficked by a friend when she was 18 years old, making her one of tens of thousands of women who've been sold across the world. This is now you at 18. I think it's you've had many betrayals in your life, right? But 2 stand out for me. One, the girl when you were first gang raped, because her story looks a bit finicky to me. It's like she knew the boys and that was her life. And then second, you meet a girl named Dombi.
Yes, and Dombi was like, you know, that girl that comes to the bridge and buy. Because we started really getting to know, like we had to survive around the gangsters that was on the streets back then, because it was everybody that was left their homes. And under the bridge, we sold a lot of button, a lot of weed. Yeah. And Long Street wasn't far from there, so a lot of girls. And she, you know, when we met, when I was in Long Street, when we were pickpocketing people, and I remember her just saying, I can help you guys better, you know, if you guys also be nice to me. So like, oh, okay, we know that kind of language. What do you want? So she's like, okay, you know, like she comes from a very well family, so she wanted very hidden and wanted to look good also, to be nice to us. So we're like, okay, we'll invite you to our territory, which was under the bridge, and that's where you can smoke. And when you're done smoking, you can leave. But the relationship grew, like a lot grew. Like sometimes.
How long between when you guys meet to when she sells you?
Very, like a year.
Okay, so she waited it out.
Yeah.
So, okay, then you guys, did she give you up in Cape Town or in Joburg?
In Joburg.
So why did you go to Joburg with her?
Because I asked her, like we had conversations about dreams. You know when you're like high and you're sitting out there, do you know how you know, the drug goes in your system?
I want to drive that car and I want to live in that house. Okay.
And she was also bright. So those conversations happened quite a lot when she was done smoking and getting a cigarette and getting, so we knew who she was, she knew who was. And then I said, you know what, you know how the shelter is, they're gonna kick us out and I can't go back there anymore to wash and clean. Can I come to Joburg where you're gonna be when you go to your university? It's like, yeah, sure, there you're gonna be fine. I'm like, no, but this time I want to probably be petrol attendant or, you know, because it looks like your family and you are good. And she's like, yeah, no problem, get yourself there because I don't want my family to find out. And I'm like, yeah, whatever, what an excuse, because you...
So you then literally get your own money.
Yes.
So you basically traffic yourself initially.
Transport-wise.
Like, oh my word, like she could have at least paid for you.
Transport-wise, I got myself there, and you know, I got myself obviously by standing on the robots.
Yeah.
And very discreet about it, because in our gangster constitution, if you do something like that, it was very freaky. Like, why wouldn't you do it with us, but why would you sell yourself out there?
Okay.
So I did it very discreetly, like standing all the way, like Table Mountain sides, the quiet areas.
And prostituting yourself.
Yes, but not very deep, I'm saying, like, because I was 18 and my body looked very tomboyish and young. So I just give out, you know, BJs or handworks, and then it came up to, it left like 100 and something, which got me to buy a 6-pack Black Label, a couple of weeds, because the train took so long. It's where there was traffic, a day and a half. And having to stay awake was a key for us. If the more high you are, the more awake you stay, the better you know what's going around with the surroundings. So that was the real purpose.
Do you think it was easier for her to leave you in that apartment in Johannesburg where then you went into a life of human trafficking because she was already aware of your life? So in her mind, she was like, well, she's already prostituting herself. She's already pimping herself out. You know, I'm literally just giving her promotion.
She didn't even know that. She thought I was literally tomboy gangster, you know. And that's why she felt maybe the surroundings that I'm in is so violent because there was gangsters, there was kids, there was fire, there was drugs. So she thought if she felt comfortable by leaving me there, knowing I can survive on my own.
So when she leaves you in the apartment and you wake up and you're surrounded by men, what goes through your mind?
First thing, the house is getting robbed.
Okay.
We're in the wrong house. But the more I'm getting punched and undressed, and the first pinch behind my leg with the injection, and feeling my body going numb was like, okay, I don't know what's going on. She's probably coming now.
You've never heard of this before?
Never.
So this is very foreign.
This is like completely new. Like we've heard stories of girls getting raped. We've heard stories somebody raping a girl on the streets that we know holding a knife or something like that. But this was, wow, you know.
How many guys was it?
Because there were like 3, because the voices and the hands and everything felt so quickly and slowly at the same time because there was drugs going down my body and the bottom and there was a shock in my head and I'm thinking she's coming back. And at some point when I felt, you know, the guy holding my hair and just duct taping my eyes, I was like, you know, it's feminism word that we use these days, whatever. And I was hoping just to pass out and it didn't. I didn't pass out. And they just left me there and then the first client came in.
So then now you are theirs because you are reliant on the drugs, right? Yes,
it was sounds of, you know, at the door, my next change, she's new, she's good, gone. He does what he does, and then I'm all, you know, probably very angry or spitting or something, and then the next person come in, and then it's just footsteps and hands, and she's new, she's good, and at some point it was ecstasy down my throat or a smack if I did not please the previous.
Did you get to a point when you enjoyed the drugs, you're like, actually just bring them so I can be in a wooze when all of this is happening?
I didn't, because I was hoping that they could give me to a point where I can just you know, faint and OD and die. Yeah.
So there was a part in your book where you said they threaten you that if you're not well behaved, they'll give you to the truck drivers.
Yes.
What's that about?
It was more of giving me over to
a lesser client.
Yes, a lesser privileged client, because now we here. And we can see who comes in. But we can just throw you to whoever and you won't get even paid. And you won't even get like a lot of drugs for you not to feel the pain. That's what they meant.
Do you become friends with the other girls?
I became more vulnerable to the other girls. I was young. And to them, I was young mentally. And I was young sexual experience. Because we didn't do that on the street. You do it like once a month in desperation.
Sorry. I'm probing a lot now. When you say sexual experience, are they expecting you to like be into it when I'm being raped?
Yes, you're supposed to be like saying what you have loud, like you're selling yourself. So I wasn't, and my mind always told me if you're in somebody else's corner, you're not allowed to come and say who you are, what you are. You just keep quiet and remain vulnerable.
That's the gangster side of you coming out.
So the same mindset was it. But when I got kicked in the house, it was in the middle of the night. So I needed to be as vulnerable as I can be to find the first location where I came in when I was sober, which was Park Station Truck Stop. And when I got there, that's where I got introduced to the girls and got my first truck client. And then just went for what my addiction already has kicked in my veins more than my head.
How long were you enslaved?
From the age of 18 until like every day, every hour, until the age of 26. After 26, when I lost Summer in a brothel when I was working.
Summer was your child?
It was my baby girl.
Yeah.
I called it Summer because we were still working every day. First month, second month, the madam still wanted you to be at work.
Yeah.
And at 6 months, that's when in-house abortion took place. And then that was when I said, I'm done. Like, go ahead, do whatever you want. And for the madam, we worked there for like a whole year. So we knew the in and outs. We knew the raids that would happen, because even when you are in a brothel or whatever they want to call it these days, there's still a raid that takes place. And in Port Elizabeth, there was a lot of raid on the Parlamun, on the drugs. And even back then, there was a lot of sport events that took place in South Africa. And Port Elizabeth was one of those cricket events. So the sponsors would come to the gentlemen's clubs and the brothels and entertain themselves with us. But then when I had, you know, the opportunity to escape, it was way back to Joburg, because nobody knew I was there.
So you're not going anywhere. We're going to chat to other people. You're going to come back in the last segment, because I want to talk about your recovery and the fact that you're now an activist and you've written this book. And as we can see, you know, you are the textbook definition of survivor. So I still want to chat a bit to you, but you're going to take a bit of a break now. When we return from the ad break, we dissect the complexities of human trafficking. Don't forget our weekly competition. I know it's not a good time to do it, right? But I want to tell you about it. You get yourself a gift card with 5,000 Rand. It's up for grabs. If you want to enter, check our social media pages for details. We will be right back. And welcome back. Today we're looking at human trafficking and the naturally complex issues associated with human trafficking. Joining me now are Marcel van der Walt, who is a human trafficking incident manager for the National Freedom Network and a former police officer who's been investigating trafficking cases for more than 15 years. Also on the couch, Deputy Minister for Justice and Constitutional Development, John Jeffrey, as well as Ibrahim Kadwa from the Hawks. Okay, Marcel, I'm going to come to you first. What does your job entail?
My job?
Yes.
So I'm a lecturer with the Department of Police Practice at UNISA, where I teach criminal and forensic investigation. I do research as well. And I'm then the case manager for the National Freedom Network, which is really a national network of NGOs working in the field of human trafficking. And, you know, we get weekly reports of cases and incidents of human trafficking, so I try and tend to that, help with some of the preliminary investigations and assist SAPs where possible. So, yeah, that's in a nutshell.
So, Ibrahim, when there's stats like, you know, I read a stat earlier where they say the human trafficking industry, you know, is worth about 50 billion Rand a year. Who is balancing all these books? Because, I mean, if Marcel is out here still investigating stuff, there's just, it's a dark world. There's stuff we don't know. How do we know it's worth 50 billion?
But I think what is important is, without going into the hype and sensationalism about trafficking in persons, it is important to understand that it is a very lucrative organized crime activity. And like many other organized crime activities, because of the clandestine nature, it will be very difficult to quantify. So naturally, in order to be able to provide a basis for people to take this seriously, various reputable organizations at best try to make some guesstimates in terms of how we can be able to respond. But what is very clear is human trafficking is a highly organized crime venture. It is very lucrative, and that is one of the attractions in why both organized crime groups as well as individuals are looking at ways of quickly generating money out of trafficking in persons.
John, is there a difference between being a sex worker and being a slave in human trafficking?
I would say so. The elements really of human trafficking is that, or of being a victim of human trafficking, is that you're there because you can't get out of it. So you can't leave. So either you are locked up, but you don't have to be locked up. It can be other pressures on you. You could be free to roam around, but you've come from another country and they've taken your passport. So I think that's the crucial difference, that with an ordinary sex worker, they can maybe decide they're going to stop doing this. With a victim of trafficking who's involved in sex work as a victim of trafficking, they can't get out.
You see, Marcel, for me, and you know, Abraham was saying that the whole sensational side of human trafficking, it just brings such misconceptions. Like, if you're human trafficked, you're taken out of the country immediately, you know. and you'll be in a place, yes, like you say, where they've taken your passport and you can't leave. What are the glaring misconceptions when it comes to human trafficking, especially for South Africans?
And you rightfully say there's a lot of misconceptions, and I mean lots of it has to be blamed on how Hollywood depicts human trafficking, right? Always white, beautiful woman, chains. I mean, it's really misrepresented. And I think one of the key issues that we see in industry is that deceit plays an overwhelming role in the majority of cases, rather than force and forced control measures. And I think the other thing is the issue of agency. You know, you just posed a question to the Deputy Minister about the difference between sex work and prostitution, and very, very well said, that cannot be conflated. But that's part of the complexity, is the agency, because we get structured agency and then forced prostitution that happens, and there's a lot of, a long continuum of subtle manipulation to force. So it's very complex, it's very hidden, as Brigadier Kadwa said, and that is what makes it so difficult. And it doesn't lend itself to be quantified, really doesn't.
But let me give you an example of trafficking that's not organised crime. And it would be a young woman, a young girl, who has been twailed by her without her consent, but her parents or her family have agreed that this man can twaila her. That, in terms of the definition of trafficking, is human trafficking.
Okay, so when it comes to, you know, the criminal aspect of it, Brigadier, you just mentioned, you know, I'm stuck on the passport thing. There's a woman, she's taken into South Africa, and they take her passport, and then she's allowed to roam. Can't you just go to the police station and say, listen, I have been taken from wherever I am, this is the situation, please take me home?
I think when we're dealing with human trafficking, experience shows that there are elements of control. So even if the person may be apparently free to move, there will be elements of psychological control. They have a host of players who would be complicit. So be able to indicate to this person that if you go away, we would have our contacts
who know where you are and will kill you.
That's it. And remember, the important thing about trafficking is it's an entire network, from recruitment, transportation. So in many cases, because of that network, the criminal markets where exploitation will take place, they will be able to know where their victims are generally coming from. So in that way, they can be able to even induce that amount of control. So those are the realities. And the issue is also there is strong links between human trafficking and other criminal activities. And remember, the organized crime networks are going to abuse the vulnerabilities. And certainly, for example, the issue of sex workers, drug addicts, they are in the ranks of the vulnerable. And if they default on their payments as far as narcotics is concerned, we saw that with sex trafficking, many of them basically are then coerced into trafficking elsewhere. So then basically, those are the ways they basically are predators on these people. But I think what is important from a law enforcement part is to be level-headed, to be very balanced, to get the facts, and to be able to deal with things so that we can be able to present best evidence in being able to then deal with the traffickers, whether they be organized crime or whether they be individuals who are opportunistic.
Anele, just from the Act's point of view, because since 2015, August 2015, the Trafficking Prevention and Combating of Trafficking in Persons Act has been in effect. And in terms of the requirements there, it's basically a threat of harm, use of force or threat of force, abuse of vulnerability, which is basically, it's a legal definition, but it's as it implies, abusing the vulnerability of the person, fraud, deception, abduction, kidnapping, abuse of power, and then the direct or indirect payment. So those are all elements, can be elements of trafficking. You only have to have one of them, but it's not saying that, so it's countering this notion that a victim of trafficking is somebody who's in a locked room and they can't get out.
And
they can be freely moving around, they can have been deceived. This person who's trafficked them, they think he's her boyfriend. Or he's her the boyfriend. And they can be deceived by that, and he can be persuading her to do various things, and she thinks that she must do it because she loves him or whatever, but actually she's a victim of trafficking. So let's not see victims of trafficking as people who are locked away, hidden away. They can be, but they also can be people amongst us.
Okay, let's take a quick ad break. Despite a growing number of cases being reported to the police, human trafficking remains underreported and too complex to quantify. When we come back from the break, we look at the challenges of combating the issue and major problem that is human trafficking. Stay with us. So let me reset this. Until 2013, South Africa did not have specific laws that could be used to prosecute human trafficking. In 2015, the Prevention and Combating of Trafficking in Persons Act was implemented. South Africa has never prosecuted a high-level human trafficking syndicate, despite being internationally regarded as an ideal location for the multinational criminal industry. Actually, Brigadier, let me start with you. Are we really like that lucrative when it comes to human trafficking? I hear like it's like paradise for human traffickers in South Africa.
I think, as I said earlier, we need to put things in perspective. Certainly there is trafficking, and it's not confined to trafficking for sexual purposes. There's different forms of trafficking, and we are basically responding adequately. For example, with forced labor, organ trafficking. I think, as I indicated earlier, it's over-sensationalized, that we are the paradise, we are the epicenter. One needs to understand this in proper context. But what is important is that the South African police, the Hawks, is at the forefront of addressing human trafficking. From the Hawk side, it is declared amongst our operational priorities. We have invested huge resources to address trafficking at a national level, at a provincial level. And more importantly, we have made significant breakthroughs in dealing with the human trafficking networks, whether they have been organized and whether they have been individual cases, more the domesticated cases. And I think the proof of the pudding is looking in terms of the actual achievements. We have given human traffickers life sentences, others lengthy jail terms, and all of this demonstrates that there is a whole of government approach. We are working very closely with civil society, who are a very important source of generating some of these cases. And I think that is how we would like to present the situation, that we are responding adequately, we are doing our utmost, and we're making huge successes. And we remain committed to disrupt and dismantle human trafficking and the broader forms of organized illegal immigration crime networks. But for that to happen, there has to be reporting, right? And this is what you're flagging the most, that we have to keep on reporting these incidents.
Sure. The United States State Department produces an annual report on the state of trafficking in different countries across the world. And there's a lot of information there, and there's a lot of information coming from non-government organizations about different forms of trafficking taking place in South Africa. But the frustration is, unless it's reported to the police, to the law enforcement agencies, it can't be investigated. Sure, not every victim of trafficking may not want to lay a charge, but unless it's reported, unless evidence is gathered, then it can't be followed up. And it's only then that one would be able to break the syndicates that may be involved, to hold those people responsible.
And what situations, what would have to be happening if there is such a situation, would you find that human trafficking thrives in? You know, like, when is it best for human traffickers to, break bank?
Well, look, that's a more difficult question, but what I would say, what I want to point out to is, in terms of the Trafficking Act, there is a national structure, a national coordinating structure of government and civil society that's meant to be involved in looking at the implementation of the Act. That structure is reproduced at a provincial level and also involving civil society. So it's very important for people with evidence to come forward. There is provision in the Act for victims of trafficking to be given support once they get identified as victims of trafficking. So it's not as if you go and report something and you're on your own. If you're identified as a victim of trafficking in terms of the Act, you're entitled to support from government and from civil society organizations.
Marcel, having dealt with these issues from every level in your career, would you also say that it's a misconception that only women are human trafficked?
Oh, of course, of course.
Because we also have that feeling.
Of
It just feels like it's a
Once
woman.
again, because that's a depiction that media feels, and that's where the sensationalism comes in, right? But I mean, labour trafficking is grossly underreported and well, also underinvestigated really in South Africa. Once again, the combating and the Prevention and Combating of Trafficking Persons Act came into operation on the 9th of August 2015. Deputy Minister Jeffries made a huge contribution in getting that through. But it was only then that labour trafficking in its true sense was really criminalised, And I think what we've seen from experiences and reports that there's a lot of stuff happening on our mines, farms, and once again coming back to why isn't it reported, because that's where the one element of debt bondage comes in, which is another form and act that is actually being criminalised in the Act. So what is debt bondage? That's where people are provided an opportunity to work on a farm or on a mine, and once they arrive at the destination where they will be providing the work, they are then informed, well, you now owe us 150,000 Rand because we've organised a trip, and until you pay the money, we're going to withhold your documents. So the point is that the likelihood of a person in that situation to report something is minimal. But definitely, men, boys, it's a high-income, low-risk crime, and it's driven by supply and demand. There's a overwhelming supply of vulnerable communities in South Africa, and there's a demand for cheap services and labour. And those are the economic underpinnings of why we have this problem. So, yeah.
Just quickly to wrap up, Grizelda alluded to when the World Cup is here, when it's the cricket, then, the demand, like you say, the demand spikes up. So now my cry is, Brigadier, for you guys, when you're fighting it, you're fighting the syndicates or the individuals. Can we ever find a time where you are, prosecuting the clients?
Well, the legislation makes provision to deal with the clients. So the important thing is naturally to deal with the real masterminds behind this. So we need to look at the entities, the networks in dealing with that. The clients, yes, to some extent we can deal with them, but that is not going to deal with the situation. And the client factor is only going to come more with trafficking for sexual purposes. So we have to look at trafficking in its broader context and dealing with it. But I think the legislation makes provision for us to deal with all facets in the value chain relating to trafficking. But our objective will be to disrupt and dismantle the actual organized crime networks, the individuals who are orchestrating this.
John.
But Anele, just to add, the Act provides that if a person derives a benefit from a victim of trafficking, knowingly derives a benefit, or the law also provides that if they ought to have known that this was a victim of trafficking, then they're guilty of an offence.
Because I just feel like the clients go from, the lowest of the low, like Grizelda was saying, the truck drivers, all the way up to high-powered CEOs who are going into brothels to have sex with little girls. So my cry is, let's shame you too.
No, well, it's more than shaming. They can be prosecuted.
Yes.
If they have sex with a victim of trafficking and they know or ought reasonably to have known that that person is a victim of trafficking, they can be prosecuted.
Okay.
So be a bit more careful.
John, Marcel, Brigadier Abraham, thank you so much for your time, guys. We say goodbye to these guests. When we return, we look at how to find help for human trafficking victims and tips on how to avoid on becoming a victim. We'll wrap it up with that. Stay with us. And welcome back. We're now getting to the end of the conversation, and we're just about to get into rehabilitating human trafficking survivors, reintegrating them into society, and tips to yourself on how not to fall victim of human trafficking. Joining me right now, Tabitha Lage, who runs an anti-human trafficking organization, Hope for Women, which helps help human trafficking survivors. Grizelda Grootboom is back, and she's now an activist for Embrace Dignity. So why did you champion this?
Certainly didn't choose to champion it.
Really?
I came upon it.
Okay.
I was out in an informal settlement one day, and through our relationship with the community in that informal settlement, it was made aware to us that there was human trafficking going on in that area. At that time, I didn't myself realize that that was human trafficking. But as I did my research and started connecting with international organizations, I realized that it was definitely human trafficking.
And at which point do you fight it? Do you fight the beginning of it? Do you rehabilitate? Are you reporting to the Hawks? Are you busting down doors? You know, what are you doing?
Hope for Women has various areas, and we are focusing on all the areas related to that, and that's prevention and awareness, intervention, restoration, and reintegration. Okay, let's talk about restoration. I said the one thing I want to talk to you when you come back, Grizelda, is how did you get out of it? Like, you know, you said you lost your daughter and you decided enough. But I mean, yes, you can get out, but it's so easy to get back in. How did you stop yourself from getting back in?
I went back in. I mean, escape, of course. The first was I ended up in a hospital because I refused to take a client after abortion. With that, I got beaten and ended up in the hospital. And after being in the hospital for a while, I ended up in rehab for a year. And by then I was 27, and that took place. And again, then, you know, they tried to put me in another shelter where I can help other younger kids. And then 28, that still didn't work. The pimp was waiting right outside. And of course, I went back to the same people, and because there was no space in place in you know, society for a 20-year-old woman where she doesn't have an ID or anything. So I ended up working with the pimps to sell drugs or drop it, and that's how my escape happened. But I also helped quite a lot to soup kitchens, churches that ran programs, weekends, and one of the churches was in Johannesburg, where I attended a lot, and then there was another church also after that one because it was survival for me.
Tabitha, I mean, there are a lot of drugs involved in this, and you find that the ladies that are coming to you for restoration and rescue are hooked on drugs. How do you approach that entire process where you have to take them off the drugs, you have to rehabilitate them, and then restore them for society?
Well, the most important thing at that stage is to make sure that they get the attention of being able to come off detox from the drugs. And so where that comes in is that we partner with facilities where there are opportunities for them to go into perhaps a drug rehabilitation centre to be able to come off the drugs, to detox before they can move on to the next stages. It is vital, it's very, very important.
And how do you, because I mean, people are watching, parents are watching, they're obviously freaking out. You know, you want to empower your kids, be it a boy, be it a girl, and how not to, you know, fall victim to human trafficking. When you talk to the people you rehabilitate, what do they say? What are the things we need to be looking out for?
Well, there are various things that we can actually look out for, but I think the most important thing is that as parents, we need to first educate and equip ourselves on what human trafficking actually really is. It's good for us as parents to be able to identify what the red flags are. And one can do that by connecting with an organization that's on the ground, going on a workshop, getting yourself educated, getting yourself equipped, asking these hard questions, and then having those conversations with the children.
Grizelda, these were people you knew. I mean, Dombi, you knew. Even the first girl who led you into being gang raped, you knew. Now, when you are giving your talks, and I mean, I know you are an activist on Facebook and people are asking you questions and they're looking for you for answers, what do you say to someone so that you can prevent them going through what you went through?
I tell them the honest truth, like, you know, follow your instincts. If you feel that, you know, the friend that you trust brought a friend that doesn't go down good in the club, just go home. Don't be asking the friend that you trust that, what's this new friend's deal? Social media-wise, the job you have, the job you're looking forward to, is it really out there? Is it a model agency? Is it really that? The same thing with family friends too. Question that. Why is my younger brother acting all weird? Why does he have a rich friend suddenly and he hasn't been working? Prevention also in communities where there's not much resources and information. If anything goes wrong, the first thing is go to to the police stations, as we are teaching police stations now to have those information resource lines and information lines going on, and go to and stand there, even because I know police are like, no, we're not educated around this, so we don't deal with this kind of cases. Push to get your right, because I know I've experienced several times where we were in police stations or clinics where you ask for assistance and you have to go through such a long thing where your pimp is right outside. So you still have to push and get the information. But I always tell young people, you're very lucky now. There's a lot of NGOs that's working out there.
The Tabithas of the world.
Yes, and be part of it. And parents, you know, be aware of your children, who they're talking to on social media. You still are the parents.
Yeah.
So put your foot down. Like, let them know that, nah, this picture is photoshopped, kid. Come on. Although kids are the internet. Usually I say kids are the internet now than their devices they have. Because you give your phone to a child, it's gone.
I'm always so concerned about how you guys stay open. How do you keep your doors open? Who supports you? Who gives you money? Do you get support from the government? So this is your platform. Who helps you, Tabitha?
We currently don't have any funding from government, so a lot of our funding is private funding. And that's through doing events, doing all sorts of things, you know, as much as we can to get funding in. So yeah, it's all private.
Okay, so where do people get hold of you if they're thinking that their company could help you out?
We have a website, www.hopeforwomen.co.za. We are on
You
Facebook.
said it really quickly. No one heard you. Say it again.
www.hopeforwomen.co.za.
Hope for Women, yes. And that's where people can get hold of you. Grizelda, you?
I don't get much funding. Yeah, it's when you are out there talking. And
like this.
The book. Hoping the book does get an award out there. So I will tell people, please, please, please buy the book. So those awards, can I get them? Then more than royalties. We all know the policies.
Yeah.
But work out there doing activism platform. Usually I'm very blessed that people actually go out and find me and bring me to their platforms. But
all right. Her name is Grizelda Grootboom. Her book is called Exit. It's a true story. We heard bits of it today. Go and get the book because it's the way she keeps her activism going. Tabitha, thank you so much for the work that you do as well. Hopeforwomen.co.za. Thank you so much to all my guests today. The key message is always remain vigilant, trust your instinct, and trust nobody, clearly. Thank you to all my guests today for sharing their insight as we try to understand this huge pandemic, human trafficking. From me and the team, until next time, goodbye.